Welcome everybody, I'm the Tabletop Tyrant. On this channel we're about building communities, models, and getting those sweet minis tabletop ready. So make sure you got your brushes, your chippies, your snacks, your soda, and let's deep dive on the 12th Legion World Eaters Land Raider. So first things first off the bat, I'm a huge sucker for red. It's honestly one of my favorite colors to work with in paint. I find myself doing tons of armies with at least some sort of red in it. It's just my go-to, it's something I can't help. The big thing when I realized working with red is figuring out how to get that sweet look to look just right. And for the World Eaters, I think, in my opinion for myself, I nailed a decent color scheme. So what I do is I start with the slow build up and I'll airbrush Galvorbach red all over the entire model. So once the Galvorbach red is done being airbrushed, I'll move on to Mephiston red. And I'll start pulling my red out towards the raised areas or areas that I feel would be like more accented with the light, right? Like the front of that Land Raider opening. I hit just the very front and pull it back a little bit, but leaving most of the Galvorbach in the recesses. And then finally, I use Dark Vermilion red. It's by model color. However, it's pretty close to Evil Sun Scarlet. If that's something that you're more in the look for, or you're working with only Citadel, Evil Sun Scarlet would be the next. And then I'm really careful when blasting this color out of the airbrush, and I try to leave it thin to a point where it's a glaze, where I can slowly build up and get that process really looking the way I want without jumping into it, right? Why I build it up like this is because I like to do an oil wash after, and that oil wash really marries the colors together, as we'll see later on. Now I'll admit, I have my quirks when I paint. I don't mind when I'm painting something for myself to start on a color and then come back to that color later on in the model. I guess, like, what do I mean by this? So right here I'm doing the las cannons, right? And I made this decision to do the las cannons because I like seeing them kind of done. And I'm not going to go back and touch the other metallic bits until this last cannon's done. So what I do, it's quick, it makes it look like it's been fired a lot, and it's effective for what it's worth, right? Like, we're going for time on this model, and I think total runtime to paint this entire Land Raider was around 1 hour and 36 minutes, start to finish. So what I'm going to base it with is Iron Hand Steel. I'm going to go through and I'm going to re-hit it with Stormhost Silver. I'm going to grab my wash of Darushi Violet, spraying it from the tip to the mid-range. Once that's completely dry, and that's important, you want it to be completely dry or your last can will end up looking like mine where it lifted off some of the wash. You're going to hit the very tips with Black Templar's Contrast. So I'm going through, I don't mind about the overblast a little bit because it's going to kind of get washed away with the oils again, and the little speckles that are there won't look bad. It'll add to the dirty effect. So at this point I realized, I made noopsie doopsie. I forgot to do my tracks before I do the metal. Now, how do I paint my treads? Largely depends on how I base my army. For my Death Guard, I use Steel Legion Drab, because they're standing on dirt. I went for an Isfan 3, Isfan 5 setting. So they're based with Isfan, or with Steel Legion Drab, and my vehicle is hit with Steel Legion Drab to give it the simulation that is rolling through it. Now my World Eaters are more of a city fight base. They are on the old GW actual city fight bases. So I'm going to end up going with gray for my tracks, and I actually went with an Eshin gray. Now I know what you're thinking, right? You're like, Tyrant, you said you made an oopsie. Well, I did. Because I didn't do the treads with the gray before I went through and blasted all those panels with Iron Hands, now I got to hit my treads with Iron Hand Steel, followed by Stormhost Silver to give it like the metallic treads are still showing through. Alright, so after all that's done, I personally have a custom brass I've mixed myself using other metallic paints I had laying around. So if for anyone that's interested, it's 50% warp blocks, 25% cycrox, followed by 20% canoptic alloy, 5% brass scorpion, and I poured it all into an old wash pot that I thoroughly cleaned out. Now, why did I do that with the brass? I find that when I hit this brass with either an acrylic wash, an oil wash, and like different colors, say Reiklin, Agrax, Nuln, I'll get a beautiful different shade, and it kind of naturally highlights itself, saving me some of the process. So what I'm doing with this bronze is I'm pretty much going through and I'm hitting all the bits that I think would look good. Bronze, breaking up the red, you know, corn, bronze, blacks. Those are the colors that come to my mind. So, as I'm sure I don't need to say this to anybody, be careful when you're doing your bronze. You don't want to accidentally overpaint. However, if you do, you can always touch it up with Mephiston, as that'll be one of the ones, depending on where. Mephiston or either your Evil Sons or your model color Dark Vermilion, depending on where the mistake is, right? If it's further to the rear of the shaded area, probably Mephiston. Closer to the front where you highlighted, probably Dark Vermilion or Evil Sons. So in the middle of this bad boy, painting up the World Eaters logo, I decided to do the traditional way. I was going to do it the solid bronze and steel, but then I figured that's a cop-out. You're good on time. You can add a little bit of blue and green. So I ended up doing Caldor Sky as a base for my blue. And then following that, to highlight the blue, I used a 50-50 mix of Caldor Sky and Lothran Blue to get the ocean. Then for the green, I ended up going through with Wog Flesh and Lorraine Forest. As you can see, I didn't heed my own advice, and I ended up having to touch up the red a couple times. I used Mephiston for those who want to know. That's the thing about advice, right? It's always better to give it, but it's hard to take it. Alright, so after this is complete, I move to Abaddon Black and pretty much apply it the way I did with the bronze to break up the red. So I'll apply it a little bit here and there throughout the model, around the las cannons, you know, the things that make it look a little bit better. So here it is, the second oof of the day. So what happened? How did I oof? I'm back to Iron Hand Steel. It's not really an oof, it's just me being a ding dong. So I'm just touching up the small bits of my Iron Hand Steel, going through, touching up the chain, touching up the front of the Land Raider where the Marines run out of, and just trying to just tidy all that up. See, we're getting closer to the end product here. We're almost done. Home stretch is right on the way. Just kind of pretty much for me, the lenses are the next thing I'm going to have to paint. So, little tip that I do, I use Vallejo Flow Improver to really thin down my paints in the pot. And I do that because I do run Games Workshop paints through my airbrush, and thank goodness I haven't had a jam, but that's because I keep my paints thin. And the other reason why I do it is because I like to wet blend. And you'll see here, I start off with a base of Caliban Green, going through the lenses. Then I go through, touch it up with Warpstone Glow, while the paint is still wet, blending it in and marrying the colors together on the lenses, and then doing a final highlight of Moot Green, trying to drag it into that Warpstone Glow to give it that natural highlight on the lenses. And to me, it's just how I like doing it. Saves me a ton of time instead of going through my palette. I just line it up with my thumb. Boom, boom, boom. Put it on there. Done. So last but not least, we're on the last stage here. I prefer oils because I can add and take off without penalty, as you'll see me doing here with the cotton swab and the mineral spirits. So the oils I like to use a lot of is Industrial Earth for the treads, to make it look like it's been driving through sewage and rubble. I use Shadow Brown for the overall wash, keeping it really thin. Like I said in the beginning, I'm using this to marry the reds together, not to actually really get in the recesses, because we already did that with the Galvorbach Red and Mephiston. And then finally just black, and these paints are all from Abteilung. I like Abteilung. It's a brand that I've stuck with for a while. A lot of people say it takes too long to dry. However, when it's thinned out, the drying isn't too much of a hassle. And then if you see me while I'm going through here dabbing a Q-tip, it's because I didn't like the pool or how much was there. I'm just trying to wash it away and bring it back to that red. So if you decide to go the oil route and you haven't done it, I'll throw some links in the description below so that way you can go. I think I'm just going to throw them up from Amazon. Everyone seems to be familiar with it, but you can go and look it up on eBay or your respective place of shopping. You're going to find your own way to use the oils. I'm not saying mine's key. I'm not saying there's other people. I know people that just paint straight out of the tube and don't use any acrylics. Everyone finds their own way to using oils. So feel free, just have fun with it and see what works for you and how you like it. So with that being done, it's over. That's it. We pulled the Band-Aid off. We came out victorious. And now here's what we have. There you have it, a World Eater Land Raider ready to shepherd in chaos and anarchy to whatever world the 12th touch. So that's it for me, ladies and gents. Remember to catch me on Twitch at 10:30 Central, where if you have any questions, you can ask me and I can answer them live. Till next time, generals, keep turning those piles of shame into armies of fame. Peace.